All right, so why do I want to make this video? Well, the main reason I want to make this video is because I went the better part of over 25 years without knowing what was wrong with me. I was born with a genetic flaw in my lymphatic system that caused me to have a condition called lymphedema. It went untreated for a large number of years, as I said, over 25 years, without really knowing even what the name of what was wrong with me was. I didn't even really know that I had something wrong with me. That's how little information I had. All I really know is I had a lot of problems with my feet and my legs pretty much throughout my entire life. But when you just have general problems without a name, you don't really know what those problems are exactly and why you have them to begin with. The ways that this manifested were varied things, and as I understood later on, once I had a name for the condition, I kind of understood more that these were warning signs of things that were going on. Things like I had a lot of trouble with ingrown toenails. I had a lot of trouble with walking on my feet properly when I was younger. They wanted to put special inserts into my shoes and stuff like that because I didn't walk properly. And as the condition sort of worsened and worsened, in particular when I lived in Utah on my own, when I moved out there to go to college, my feet began to swell more and more. My shoes weren't fitting quite properly. I started to notice a sort of a pressure on the top of my foot, between my foot and my calf, where they were rubbing and touching more than they were before. And these were all things that were sort of, I remember noticing in the back of my mind, but didn't really register as problems. You know, they just seemed like they were changes my body was going through that I didn't really know what was going on. And in addition to having all these problems with my feet and my legs, and even way back then, this is like, this is probably around 2008, like 2009, maybe, roughly. It already had begun to take a toll on my physical activity. So my weight began to go up, which caused more health problems, and things just sort of kept compounding on top of each other. And this is around the time where the first economic downturn was happening as well. During the Obama years, when the bank stuff happened and the housing stuff happened, and gas prices were up to $4 or $5 a gallon, and things were very tough economically at that time. So I ended up having to move home, back to live with my parents again, in order to sort of keep myself afloat financially. And once I got home, it was like the house of cards really just began to collapse in a big way. All my problems got worse. My weight went up. My legs got worse. The swelling got worse. Everything got worse during this time period, until eventually I got to a point where things were so bad, in particular with my legs, that I could no longer wear shoes. I could not fit a pair of shoes on that were a normal pair of shoes. I could not wear pants anymore because the swelling in my thigh was so bad that I just really couldn't wear pants. And as a result of that, obviously I could not work. All of a sudden I was not working. I was not moving very much at all. I couldn't go outside because I was embarrassed. I couldn't wear shoes. I couldn't wear pants. So all of my life begins to shut down in every way that you would register a normal lifestyle. I just don't have it. And throughout this process, I have all these problems with my legs. In particular, my left leg ends up being my particularly bad leg. And this goes all the way down to my leg regularly, several times a year, gets infected, turns really, really red, swells even worse, becomes very sensitive, very painful, and I have alternating hot and cold flashes constantly, and I'm just in misery for sometimes a week, sometimes 2 weeks at minimum, and then several weeks of recovery to feel anything like normal again. And I'm going to my doctor. I'm going to another doctor that was technically my mom's doctor that I trusted. I'm doing the best I can to solicit opinions on what is wrong with me. Like, why do I keep having these problems? Why am I in so much pain? Why does my leg keep swelling and getting infected? You know, what's going on? And every doctor I see, some of which I would defend and say are good doctors and didn't just dismiss me, all looked at me and said, your problem is because of your weight. One doctor that I trusted in particular, and I really had a strong opinion of, told me a bunch of information that was completely wrong about why my leg swelled on the left side more than on the right, and why that leg was so messed up. And the reason I bring this up is not to obviously insult any doctors, in particular this doctor that gave me the completely wrong information. It's just to make the point that awareness and information on what is lymphedema and what are the signs of it are lacking, even in the medical community at times. So as you can imagine, when you have all these problems and they're just getting worse and worse and worse and worse, and you have no information about what is wrong with you, and you have doctors telling you that it's your weight and it's, you know, really sort of your fault, it's a very tough situation to be in. So at this point, I'm definitely heading down the road of depression. You know, I reach a point where I'm so physically incapable and I'm so in pain all the time that I'm basically just spending all my time in front of my computer playing video games on the internet. And it's during this time that I met Nectamar, and we started the guild that we were in, and where we met Kim and Stacy and all that. And that's all I focus on, because I feel like that's all I have. So I put everything into that, and I just sort of accept the reality that at that time I felt like I wouldn't live to be 40 years old. I didn't think I would be here today, at that point, at that lowest point, because I went and saw doctors, I tried everything I could do, and I couldn't get any answers. So I had all but given up. I wasn't going to kill myself or anything like that, but I just sort of accepted, let's just enjoy life for, you know, as long as we can, and we're probably not going to make it very far. So I just started putting everything into online gaming and playing with my online friends, and just kind of like, this is all I got. You know, this is all I got to look forward to. And right about this time that we hit the lowest point that I've definitely ever been in my life, things go just a little bit lower for a moment, where I'm sitting at my computer one night and I reach down, I believe it was just scratch my leg, and my hand comes back wet. You know, like my whole hand is wet, as if I'd put it into a basin of water or something. And I was like, what the heck? You know, and not knowing why your hand would come back wet when you touched your own leg, my initial reaction is, you know, did I pee myself or something? Like, where is this liquid coming from? I get up, I turn on the light, because it was dark and it was in the middle of the night at the time. And I look around on the floor, and there's just a whole puddle of what looks like water on the floor. Still visibly confused, like, where did this come from? I get a towel, I start wiping my leg. I quickly begin to realize that this liquid it's coming out of me. It's coming out of my leg, you know? I wrap it. I start like, wiping it down, whatever. There's a lot of it. And I begin to realize it's definitely coming from me. I don't fully understand why at this point. But I know this is obviously abnormal. I've got water coming out of my leg, or at least what seems like water coming out of my leg in a fairly large volume. That by the next day, my leg, eventually it stops. And then by the next day, my leg feels like it's on fire, essentially. And I go to the doctor. I schedule to go see my doctor, emergency. My regular doctor is not there. By random luck, they're not there that day. So I get thrown in to see a completely random doctor I've never seen before. And he walks into the room and looks at my legs and says, "You have lymphedema. You should be doing compression therapy." And me and my parents who were there with me at the time all look at him like, "What is that? What is lymphedema? Never heard that word." And he proceeds to explain the basics of what lymphedema is, how he knows that I have it, and the fact that this liquid, this seemingly watery substance that came out of my leg, is actually the excess fluid that my leg has been holding on to because I have lymphedema. And eventually my leg got to a point where it was so swollen and it was holding so much excess of this liquid that it could no longer contain it. And so it started to literally break through the skin and drip out of me by force, just by sheer, force of the amount of excess liquid in my leg. And as you can imagine, when you have something ripping through your skin, the whole top layers of my skin were sort of, turned into sort of a Swiss cheese. So you get to a point where my leg is so sensitive at that point that just air moving across my leg actually causes me a significant amount of pain. So he subscribes to me a compound to go get made for healing and pain relief, and apply that to my leg every day, and we kind of go through the treatment process for that. And then we are scheduled to go and see my first physical therapist that I met to get treatment for lymphedema. So we go there, we start doing that. And these people we see at this point, they're not bad, physical therapists, but they're not as knowledgeable as I later find out James is. But they get me on the road. They get the initial treatment going. They give me pretty decent information, and we start getting treatment going. Thanks to them, I get to the point where I can wear not a normal pair of shoes, but at least a pair of diabetic shoes. So I'm able to at least wear some kind of shoes. And they get me to the point that I have some mobility, some movement actually happening. They cannot fix my thigh problem, which is the biggest problem. They make an attempt at it, but they're just not really skilled enough at that point to handle some of the bigger problems that I have. So I can't still wear pants or do anything with that at that point. But they get me on the road, and they get me to where I do eventually meet James, because the first step with the wrapping and everything, the next step is to get a compression garment, and that has to be specially made and specially ordered from Germany. And the only place that does it in the whole area where I am is the place where James works. So we go there, we get the garment, we start down this road, and eventually after, doing that for I think like 2 or 3 years, where we just wore the garment without even really knowing that we could do more. Eventually I go in one day and I speak to the lady there about getting my new garment, and she looks at my legs and she says, we could do more for you. You should really consider seeing us for regular treatment, so that we can do more. And then, we kind of decide, me and my parents at the time, we decide, well, maybe we should give it a shot. Maybe we could do more. And at this point, during the first part of the therapy that we did, it's not like we did it for just a short amount of time. We did it for several months. and we'll show later in the presentation here what exactly is involved in that process. And it's not a simple process that we went through. You know, so I mean, it was reasonable at the time after we had done everything to think that we had done the best that we could do. But we just didn't know any better. You know, I mean, because again, the amount of information on this condition is very limited. There just isn't a lot. We'll talk more about that. We'll talk more about that later on in the video and stuff like that. But that's kind of how we get into the PowerPoint section of this, to kind of give you the primer. You know, and up until this point, we're in, like I say, our condition is only getting worse. You know, we were putting on weight dramatically. We couldn't wear shoes. We couldn't wear pants. I was in what I would describe, if you're going off a 1 to 10 scale of pain, I was on like a 7 or 8, an 8 pain constantly, in my feet in particular. So I'm at a very, very low point, but we see a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel talking to the first physical therapist. And then more light comes when we meet James and we go to doing therapy with him. And like I say, I'll go more into that as we move through the PowerPoint here. So we're going to go ahead and get started on to that portion of it.